The Starliner Recovery Dawn hung in the void, its silhouette a predatory slash against the distant stars. Once a salvage vessel designed for deep space retrieval operations, it had been refitted with military-grade armaments, reinforced hull plating, and specialized containment facilities. The ship's new mission was far removed from its original purpose. The Recovery Dawn now served as a livestock retrieval vessel, tasked with enforcing the Galactic Authority's increasingly stringent xenobiological protocols. Captain Mira Santos stood on the command bridge, her weathered features reflected in the polarized viewport. At 47, she carried herself with the rigid posture of someone who had spent too many years in artificial gravity. Her dark hair was streaked with premature silver, pulled back in a severe regulation bun that emphasized the hard angles of her face. "Status report, Lieutenant," she said, not turning from the viewport. Lieutenant Oren Kahl approached, his tall Vexarian frame looming over the human captain. His species-characteristic six-fingered hands clutched a datapad, while the fine scales covering his face caught the light of the bridge instrumentation, giving his features an iridescent blue-green sheen. "All systems nominal, Captain," Kahl reported, his voice carrying the distinctive harmonic undertone of Vexarian speech. "We're holding position at the coordinates specified in the retrieval order. Maintenance reports the containment bay is prepped and ready." Santos nodded. "And the crew?" Kahl hesitated, the translucent membrane of his inner eyelid flickering, a tell that Santos had learned to recognize as discomfort. "The crew is apprehensive. Captain, after what happened at Big Jim's outpost last week, morale has been affected. Some are questioning the wisdom of this assignment." Santos finally turned from the viewport, fixing Kahl with a steely gaze. "Questioning? This isn't a democracy." "Lieutenant, we have our orders." The Homestead 7 was operating with unauthorized Earth fauna. Rules were broken. "We're here to clean up the mess." Kahl's scaled fingers tightened around the datapad. "With respect, Captain, Big Jim's retrieval operation resulted in 3 dead crew members and a cargo bay that required complete decontamination. And that was just a Terran feline." "A Maine Coon," Santos corrected automatically. "An oversized variant, and the handler failed to follow proper sedation protocols. The situation was mishandled from the start." She crossed to her command station, activating the holodisplay with a gesture. "This assignment is different. We have better intelligence, and we're prepared." The holodisplay flickered to life, projecting the administrative profile of their target, Homestead 7, a mid-sized agricultural vessel. Originally commissioned as a self-sustaining farm ship for Outer Rim colonies, it had been repurposed by independent settlers seeking to establish a life beyond authority regulations. For 7 years, it had maintained a moderately successful operation, supplying fresh produce to outposts and stations along the Cygnus trade route, until a routine customs inspection had discovered contraband. "According to records," Kahl said, scrolling through his datapad, "Homestead 7 was cited for numerous violations: unregistered hydroponics modifications, illegal seed variants, and unauthorized Earth fauna." He paused, finger hovering over the screen. "Including a Terran canine classified as a Pitbull, designated as a Class 3 restricted species under the Dangerous Terrestrial Organisms Act." Santos's mouth thinned to a hard line. "The owners?" "Rebecca and Michael Torres, third-generation spacers, originally from the Luna colonies. No previous violations, clean records. They claimed the animal was a service companion, but failed to file the proper exemption documentation." "And the distress signal?" Kahl switched screens on his datapad. "Automated beacon triggered approximately 53 hours ago. No verbal communication received." The message simply indicated catastrophic system failures and hull integrity compromises. Authority response? A patrol cruiser investigated 30 hours ago and reported that the vessel appears to be adrift and severely damaged. Life support systems are failing, and scans detected minimal biosigns. The cruiser's captain noted, and I quote, "Nothing worth salvaging except the contraband canine, as per standing orders regarding Earth fauna." Santos nodded. "So they left it for us? Convenient." She toggled the ship's intercom. "Attention boarding party. Prep for retrieval operation. Full tactical gear, containment equipment, and environmental suits. Briefing in Cargo Bay 3 in 20 minutes. She released the intercom button and turned to Kaal. "You'll lead the boarding party. I want that animal recovered intact." Kaal's inner eyelid flickered again. "Captain, if I may, our intelligence on this particular breed is concerning. Historical records suggest—" "I know the history, Lieutenant," Santos interrupted. "The propaganda about fighting dogs and locking jaws is mostly xenophobic nonsense from Earth's past. They're just animals, intelligent, yes, but manageable with proper protocols. It's not the historical records that concern me," Kaal said quietly. "It's the bio-readings from the patrol cruiser. They're inconsistent with standard Terran canine profiles." Santos dismissed this with a wave. "Interference from the ship's damage, most likely. Or perhaps the Tauruses modified their pet. Genetic tampering isn't uncommon among fringe settlers." She met Kaal's gaze directly. "Your concerns are noted, Lieutenant, but our orders stand. Bring back the Pitbull. No questions." Kaal straightened, adopting the formal posture of his species. "Understood. Captain," as he turned to leave, Santos added, "And Kaal, remember the authority regulations. This isn't about the settlers or their attachment to unregulated species. This is about maintaining order and biosecurity." "Yes, Captain," Kaal replied, his voice perfectly neutral as he left the bridge. Santos returned to the viewport, watching the distant shape of Homestead 7 as it tumbled slowly against the backdrop of stars. Something about the vessel's silhouette seemed wrong, fragmented, as though it had been torn apart from within rather than damaged by external forces. She pushed the thought aside. They had their mission. The rest was irrelevant. The boarding shuttle detached from Recovery Dawn with a pneumatic hiss, thrusters igniting as it navigated the debris field surrounding Homestead 7. From this distance, the agricultural vessel's damage was even more apparent. Massive hull breaches gaped like wounds, exposing interior compartments to vacuum. Structural supports protruded at unnatural angles, twisted and bent as though subjected to enormous pressure. Inside the shuttle, Lieutenant Kaal addressed the 5-member boarding party, his voice calm despite the ominous sight before them. "Our objective is clear. Locate and retrieve the Terran canine. According to the ship's registered layout, the most likely location is the residential section on Deck C, though the animal may have relocated due to the damage. Engineer Savel Rem will accompany us to assess structural integrity and handle any technical obstacles." Rem nodded, adjusting the specialized tool harness over her environmental suit. As a Corvin, her 4-armed physiology made her particularly adept at complex mechanical tasks. Medic Hisajero will monitor biosigns and handle any sedation requirements. Kaal continued. The medic, a compact human with close-cropped dark hair, checked her medical kit. "I've loaded tranquilizers calibrated for Terran canines up to 50 kilograms. Should be more than sufficient. Security officers Nev and Tallow will maintain perimeter control and assist with containment." Kaal finished, gesturing to the 2 burly Vrasi twins, whose reinforced suits barely contained their muscular frames. "Remember, this is a standard retrieval operation," Kahl emphasized. "The vessel is severely damaged, so watch for structural hazards. Life support is minimal, so we remain in full environmental gear at all times. Communication checks every 5 minutes." The shuttle pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Approaching Homestead 7 primary docking port. Be advised, the port appears damaged. Attempting secondary connection." Kahl watched through the viewport as they maneuvered toward a smaller maintenance airlock. Even this showed signs of damage, deep gouges in the metal around the seals, as though something had attempted to claw its way through. "Those don't look like decompression marks," Officer Nev muttered, leaning forward to peer at the scarred metal. "Focus on the mission," Kahl replied, though privately he shared the security officer's unease. The shuttle shuddered as it established a seal with the airlock. After a tense moment, the indicator lights flashed green. "Seal is holding," the pilot announced. "Pressure equalization in progress." Kahl activated his helmet comm. "Captain Santos, boarding party is preparing to enter Homestead 7 via maintenance airlock on Deck B. Will proceed to residential section once aboard." "Acknowledged, Lieutenant." Santos's voice replied through the static. "Remember, we need that animal alive and intact." "Understood, Captain. Call out." He turned to his team. "Check your equipment one last time. We move in 60 seconds. The airlock cycled open with a reluctant groan, revealing a dimly lit maintenance corridor beyond. Emergency lighting cast red shadows across bent panels and exposed wiring. The artificial gravity was functioning but inconsistent. Loose objects hovered centimeters above the floor before settling back down as the field fluctuated. "Gravity's unstable," Engineer Rem observed, consulting her scanner. "Reading approximately 0.7 standard, but it's varying by plus or minus 0.2 at irregular intervals." "Life support?" Kahl asked. "Minimal. Atmosphere is present but thin. Temperature at 14 degrees Celsius and dropping. Power readings fluctuating throughout the vessel." Kahl nodded. "We proceed as planned. Stay alert for gravity shifts." They moved forward, boots magnetizing automatically when the gravity weakened. The corridors showed signs of a desperate evacuation, abandoned personal effects, scattered tools, and what appeared to be dried fluid stains on some surfaces. "Blood?" Officer Tallow asked, kneeling beside a dark patch. Medic Jero scanned it. "Negative. Hydraulic fluid, but there are trace organic compounds mixed in." They continued towards a junction where the corridor split into 3 branches. Kahl consulted the ship's schematic on his wrist display. "Residential section is 2 decks up through the central passage. Rem, what's the structural integrity like ahead?" The engineer frowned at her readings. "Uncertain. I'm getting odd interference." She tapped her scanner. "According to this, there are large masses of metal that don't correspond to the ship's design. Almost like barricades." "Barricades?" Kahl repeated. "Against what?" Before Rem could answer, a low, resonant sound echoed through the corridor, part growl, part vibration. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, traveling through the metal of the ship itself. The team froze. "What was that?" Nev whispered, hand moving to his weapon. "Unknown," Kahl replied, keeping his voice steady. "Could be air pressure equalizing through damaged sections." Nobody looked convinced. "Let's keep moving." Kahl ordered. "Stay together." They proceeded through the central passage, encountering increasingly bizarre damage as they went. Panels had been ripped from walls, exposing the ship's infrastructure. Claw-like gouges scored metal surfaces at irregular intervals. Most disturbing were the scattered fragments that Kal initially took for debris until Jero stopped to examine one. "This is bone," the medic said, her voice tight. "Very dense bone. Not human, not like any structure I'm familiar with." "The animal," Officer Nev suggested. Jero shook her head. "Too large for a standard Terran canine, and the density. It's unnatural, almost metallic in composition." Kal contacted the ship. "Captain Santos, we're encountering unusual biological evidence. Bone fragments of unknown origin." Static crackled before Santos's voice came through. "Is it interfering with the mission?" "Negative, but—" "Then proceed to the objective. Lieutenant, we can analyze curiosities later." "Understood," Kal replied, signaling the team forward. They reached a vertical access shaft where the conventional stairwell had collapsed. Rem secured climbing lines, compensating for the fluctuating gravity as they ascended toward the residential deck. As they climbed, Kal noticed more of the strange bone fragments embedded in the shaft walls, some protruding at angles that suggested tremendous force had driven them into the metal. When they finally emerged onto the residential deck, the damage was even more severe. What had once been a comfortable living space for the farming crew now resembled a war zone. Living quarters had been torn open, furnishings shredded, and personal effects scattered across the deck. The gravity here was even more unstable, causing lightweight debris to drift in slow, ghostly orbits. This doesn't make sense," Tallow muttered. "What could cause this kind of damage from inside the ship?" "Focus," Kal reminded him. "We're looking for the Torres quarters and any sign of their pet." According to the ship's layout, the Torres family occupied the largest quarters at the end of the residential section, befitting their status as the vessel's operators. As the team picked their way through the devastation, Rem suddenly signaled for a halt. "Movement ahead," she whispered, pointing to her scanner. "Something large, heat signature consistent with a mammal, but fluctuating." Kal gestured for Officers Nev and Tallow to take flanking positions while he, Rem, and Jero held back. The security officers advanced cautiously, weapons ready, disappearing around a bend in the corridor. Seconds later, Nev's voice came through the comm. "Lieutenant, you need to see this." The remainder of the team moved forward to find the officers standing at the entrance to what had been the Torres quarters. The reinforced door had been torn from its frame, not cut or blown, but literally ripped away. The metal peeled back like fabric. Inside, the devastation was complete. Furniture had been reduced to splinters and twisted metal. Personal belongings lay shredded and scattered. Most disturbing was what appeared to be a massive containment pod in the center of the room, or rather, what remained of one. The reinforced glass and metal structure had been shattered from within, fragments of its components embedded in the surrounding walls. This wasn't their quarters. Kal realized, looking at the remnants of medical monitoring equipment. They converted it into some kind of containment facility. "For the dog?" Jero asked, scanning the area. "This is military-grade confinement technology. Why would settlers need this for a pet?" "Maybe it wasn't just a pet," Rem suggested quietly. A soft ping from her scanner drew their attention. "I'm detecting fresh organic residue. Very fresh." She pointed toward a maintenance access point at the rear of the quarters. "Through there." Kal signaled for Nev to open the access point. The panel slid aside to reveal a narrow service tunnel, barely large enough for them to crawl through single file. Deep gouges marked the metal walls, and more bone fragments were visible, some seemingly fused with the surrounding materials. "I don't like this, Lieutenant," Tallow said, eyeing the tunnel. "Something's very wrong here." Call found himself agreeing. But orders were orders. Nev, take point. Jero, follow with tranquilizers ready. I'll be third. Then Rem, with Tallow covering our rear. They entered the tunnel in sequence, helmet lights illuminating their way through the cramped space. The further they progressed, the more pronounced the damage became. In some sections, it appeared as though something had literally eaten through the metal, leaving edges with the distinctive patterns of powerful acid erosion. Biologicals shouldn't be able to do this, Jero whispered. Not even modified ones. The Torres couple were agricultural engineers. Call replied. Who knows what experiments they might have conducted out here, beyond authority oversight. They emerged into what had once been the ship's hydroponics bay, a vast chamber designed to grow crops in the vacuum of space. Now, it was a scene of absolute destruction. The elaborate system of growing platforms had collapsed, spilling soil and plant matter across the deck. Irrigation pipes hung from the ceiling, leaking nutrient fluid that had formed pools across the uneven floor. Most of the transparent ceiling panels had shattered, leaving the bay exposed to space except for the emergency force fields that flickered erratically. Struggling to maintain atmospheric integrity, "Gravity's even more unstable here," Rem warned as a piece of hydroponic equipment suddenly lifted off the floor before crashing back down. "And those force fields won't hold forever." Kal opened his comm channel. "Captain Santos, we've reached the hydroponics bay. No sign of the target animal yet, but we've found evidence of containment facilities far beyond what would be necessary for a standard pet." "Elaborate," Santos replied, her voice cutting through static. "Military-grade confinement pod, destroyed from within. Extensive structural damage throughout the vessel. Abnormal biological residue and bone fragments of unusual composition." A pause, then, "Your assessment, Lieutenant?" Kal chose his words carefully. "I believe the Torreses were involved in genetic experimentation, possibly using their pet as a test subject. The resulting creature may have been responsible for the ship's current condition." Another pause, longer this time. "The retrieval order stands, Lieutenant. If the animal has been modified, that makes its recovery even more imperative. We can't risk such a specimen falling into unauthorized hands." "Captain, with respect, my team may be at significant risk. Request permission to abort and quarantine the entire vessel." "Denied. Lieutenant, complete your mission." The transmission cut off. Kal turned to find his team watching him, their expressions hidden behind helmet visors, but their tension evident in their postures. "We continue," he says simply. "But we modify our approach. No one proceeds alone. Weapons free. But remember, we need the specimen alive." They spread out in pairs to search the massive hydroponics bay, maintaining constant communication. Kal partnered with Jero, while Rem accompanied Nev, and Tallow secured their exit point. "Lieutenant," Rem's voice came through after several minutes of searching. "We found something unusual near the irrigation control station." Kal and Jero made their way across the bay, navigating around collapsed growing platforms and through shallow pools of nutrient fluid. They found Rem and Nev crouched beside what appeared to be a makeshift nest constructed from torn hydroponic materials, scraps of metal, and what might have once been bedding from the residential section. "Signs of habitation," Rem explained, scanning the area. "But the readings are confused. It's as if the occupant has a highly variable biological signature." Jero knelt to examine the nest. "There's something here." She carefully extracted a small object from the tangled materials, a worn leather collar with a simple metal tag attached. The tag bore a single word: Echo. "Echo," Kal repeated. "The animal's name." "Look at this," Nev said, pointing to a datapad half buried in the nest. Its screen was cracked, but it still functioned when Rem activated it. The screen displayed a personal log entry. The date stamp indicated it had been recorded just hours before the distress beacon had been triggered. A woman's face appeared, Rebecca Torres, according to the identification photo in the corner. Her expression was a mixture of pride and fear, her eyes darting occasionally to something off-screen. "If you're watching this, then you've come for Echo," she began, her voice surprisingly steady. "I need you to understand what we've done, and why. When the Authority banned companion animals on Outer Rim settlements, calling them unnecessary biological risks, they took away more than pets. They took away family members." She looked away briefly, responding to a sound off camera. "Echo was more than a dog to us. He was the last connection to Earth we had. So yes, when they classified Pitbulls as dangerous, we modified him. The baseline genetics were already remarkable: loyalty, intelligence, resilience. We simply enhanced them." Torres leaned closer to the camera, lowering her voice. "The bone metal fusion was the breakthrough. Self-repairing, adaptive, growing stronger with each regeneration cycle. But we underestimated." She glanced away again, this time with clear apprehension. "We underestimated the bond formation, the protective instinct amplification." A crash sounded in the background, and Torres looked over her shoulder. "He senses them coming. The Authority inspection team. He knows what they'll try to do." She turned back to the camera, her expression now urgent. "If you're here to take him, know this. We made him to survive, to protect. He won't allow himself to be separated from what's his. And after what they did to Michael..." Her voice broke. "Please," she whispered. "If there's any humanity left in the Authority, remember this: never separate family members. The consequences..." The recording cut off abruptly. Call stared at the blank screen, a growing sense of dread settling over him. "We need to leave, now." But the mission," Nev began, "has changed." Call finished for him. "We're not dealing with a pet, or even a standard genetic modification. We're dealing with something far more dangerous." He activated his comm. "Captain Santos, we've recovered new intelligence. The target animal has undergone extensive genetic modification, including some form of metal biological fusion. The creature appears to be highly dangerous and possibly still evolving. Recommend immediate withdrawal and quarantine protocols." Only static answered him. "Captain Santos, Recovery Dawn. Do you read?" "Nothing." Rem checked her scanner. "Communications are being blocked. Some kind of interference." She looked up sharply. "It's moving. Fast. Coming this way." The team drew together, forming a defensive circle. "Options?" Call asked. "Retreat to the shuttle." Tallow suggested from his position at the exit. "We can..." His words cut off in a startled cry. The others turned to see Tallow lifted bodily into the air, suspended by something that had emerged from a ventilation shaft above him. In the shifting emergency lighting, they caught only glimpses: a massive jaw lined with metal-reinforced teeth, eyes that reflected light like polished copper, and a muscular body covered in what appeared to be a patchwork of fur and metallic plates. Then, Tallow was gone, pulled into the ventilation shaft with a scream that echoed briefly before being cut off. "Move!" Call shouted. Firing his weapon at the shaft opening, the energy blast struck metal, illuminating the bay momentarily, but hitting nothing vital. The team ran, navigating the treacherous debris field as they headed for the exit on the far side of the bay. Behind them, something large crashed through ventilation shafts and torn ceiling panels, moving with unnatural speed and agility despite its apparent size. They had nearly reached the exit when Nev stumbled, his foot caught in a tangle of irrigation tubing. As he fell, a shadow detached itself from the ceiling above him, descending with terrifying precision. "Nev!" Rem cried, turning back. Call grabbed her, pulling her toward the exit. "We can't help him!" Nev's scream was brief. When they glanced back, he was gone, with only a spreading pool of dark fluid marking where he had fallen. The remaining three reached the exit corridor, sealing the emergency bulkhead behind them. Metallic impacts immediately began to sound against the other side. "It won't hold long," Rem gasped, reading her scanner. "That thing, it's not just following us, it's hurting us." "Hurting us where?" Jero asked, checking her nearly depleted medical kit. A tremendous impact shook the bulkhead, leaving a protruding dent in the reinforced metal. "Doesn't matter." Call decided. "We need to reach the shuttle. New objective, survival." They ran through the maintenance corridors, following Rem's scanner as it mapped the increasingly unfamiliar layout of the damaged vessel. Twice they were forced to change course when passages ahead were blocked by collapsed debris, or deliberately sealed. Call began to suspect, by their hunter. "The shuttle is one level down," Rem announced as they reached a junction. "But the main access is blocked. We'll need to go through." She never finished the sentence. The deck beneath them suddenly tore open, metal peeling back like paper. Rem disappeared through the breach with a startled cry, her scanner clattering to the deck beside the jagged opening. Cal lunged for her, catching only the fading echo of her voice as she fell. He and Jero stared at the hole. Weapon and medical scanner pointed into the darkness below. Nothing emerged, nothing followed, just silence. "It's picking us off," Jero whispered, her composed medical demeanor finally cracking. One by one, Call retrieved Rem's fallen scanner. "The shuttle is close, less than 100 meters through that service tunnel." He pointed to a narrow opening barely large enough for them to squeeze through. "You think it doesn't know that?" Jero asked. "You heard Rem. It's hurting us." "We have no choice," Call replied, his inner eyelid flickering rapidly now. "On my mark, we make for the tunnel. Ready? Mark!" They sprinted the short distance to the service tunnel, diving into the narrow space as something massive crashed into the corridor behind them. Call caught a glimpse of muscular shoulders covered in a patchwork of fur and metallic plating before he and Jero were crawling frantically through the confined space. "It can't follow us through here," Jero gasped. "Too big." A deafening roar reverberated through the tunnel, followed by the sound of metal being torn and crushed. "It doesn't need to follow." Call realized. "It's going around." They crawled faster, emerging into a small maintenance hub where several service tunnels converged. Across the chamber was an airlock, their path to the docking bay where their shuttle waited. "There," Call pointed. "The airlock controls are still operational." They rushed to the control panel, Call inputting the emergency override as Jero kept watch. The airlock cycle began, the outer door slowly sliding open to reveal the docking bay beyond. A crash from one of the other service tunnels announced they were no longer alone. "Go!" Call shouted, pushing Jero toward the airlock. "Get to the shuttle. I'll hold it off." "You can't." That's an order. The authority needs to know what happened here. Someone has to report back." Jero hesitated, then nodded, squeezing Call's arm once before rushing into the airlock. As the door began to close behind her, Call turned to face the thing that emerged from the largest service tunnel. His first coherent thought was that it was beautiful, in the way that apex predators were always beautiful, a perfect evolutionary design. The creature that had once been a Pitbull now stood nearly as tall as Kal himself, its muscular body a seamless fusion of organic and metallic components. Its skull had expanded to accommodate what must be enhanced brain tissue, and its jaws could easily crush bone or metal, as the ship's damage attested. But it was the eyes that captured Kal's attention, intelligent, aware, and burning with purpose. This was no mindless beast. This was a thinking entity with clear intentions. "Echo," Kal said quietly, lowering his weapon slightly. "That's your name, isn't it?" The creature, Echo, tilted its head, metal-reinforced ears shifting forward. It made no move to attack. "You protected your family," Kal continued, comprehension dawning. "The inspection team came for you, and you defended your people. That's what you were designed to do." Echo took a step forward, a low growl emanating from its chest, not aggressive, Kal realized, but communicative. "Where are Rebecca and Michael now?" Kal asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Echo's growl deepened, and its metal-infused claws scraped against the deck plating. "The Authority took them," Kal guessed. "Or tried to, and you couldn't protect them." The creature's posture shifted, a ripple of tension moving through its enhanced musculature. Kal realized he was running out of time. "I understand loyalty," he said quickly. "I understand protecting what's yours. My people, my crew, they were mine to protect, and I failed them." He slowly raised his hands, palms out. "But I'm beginning to think we were never meant to be enemies. Echo, we were sent here under false pretenses, to capture you, to separate you from your family again." Echo snarled, taking another step forward. "I won't do that," Kal promised. "You have my word, but I need to leave, to tell others what happened here, to make sure no one else comes for you." For a long moment, the creature regarded him, its enhanced senses no doubt detecting every fluctuation in Kal's biochemistry, every indication of truth or deception. Then, with deliberate slowness, it stepped aside, clearing the path to the airlock. Kal hardly dared to breathe. He moved carefully, keeping his movements telegraphed and non-threatening as he edged toward the airlock. Echo watched him, motionless except for the occasional twitch of a metal-reinforced ear. When Kal reached the airlock controls, he paused. "What will you do now? This ship can't sustain you much longer." Echo's gaze shifted to the viewport, beyond which the stars shone with cold indifference. "You'll find another ship," Kal realized. "Another home." The creature made no response, but Kal thought he detected something like affirmation in its stance. "Good luck, Echo," he said quietly, activating the airlock cycle. As the door began to close between them, Echo raised his massive head and released a sound that was neither growl nor bark, a resonant, multi-toned call that seemed to vibrate through the very structure of the ship. A farewell, perhaps, or a warning. The airlock sealed shut, and Kal was alone. The shuttle detached from Homestead 7 with Kal and Jero as its only passengers. Through the viewport, they watched as the agricultural vessel receded, its broken silhouette a dark blot against the stars. "Will it survive out there?" Jero asked, her medical training seemingly compelling her to care even for the creature that had decimated their team. "I believe it will," Kal replied. "It was designed to adapt and overcome, and it has a powerful drive to live." "What will you tell the captain?" Kal considered this as the shuttle's autopilot plotted a course back to Recovery Dawn. "The truth, that we encountered something beyond our understanding or control, that the mission parameters were based on incomplete intelligence, That we lost good people to an enemy we were never prepared to face. Jiro nodded, then hesitated. And about letting it live? Call's inner eyelid flickered once. Some details may be omitted for clarity. The shuttle's communication system crackled to life. Shuttle 1, this is Recovery Dawn. Report status. Captain Santos's voice was tense. Cal activated the comm. Recovery Dawn. This is Cal. We are returning with 2 survivors. Myself and Medic Jero. Officers Nev and Talo and Engineer Rem have been lost. The mission objective was unattainable. A long pause, then, explain. Lieutenant. The target was not as described. Captain, it had been extensively modified, genetically, cybernetically, beyond anything in our briefing. The creature decimated our team with tactical precision. It controlled the environment. It anticipated our movements. It systematically eliminated our options until escape was our only choice. And the animal itself, Santos demanded. Its status? Cal met Jero's gaze before answering. Unknown. Captain. Last seen in the hydroponics bay, but the structural integrity of that section was failing. With the extensive hull breaches, decompression was imminent. Survival would have been unlikely. Another long pause. Very well, Lieutenant. Return to the ship. Full debrief upon arrival. Acknowledged. Captain. Shuttle 1 out. Cal closed the channel. Jero exhaled slowly. She doesn't believe you. No, Cal agreed, but she has no evidence to the contrary. They fell silent as the shuttle approached Recovery Dawn, its sleek predatory form growing larger in the viewport. Cal wondered if the captain would order another team to attempt retrieval, or perhaps even more drastic measures, a targeted energy strike to destroy Homestead 7 entirely. Eliminating both evidence and specimen. As if reading his thoughts, Jero asked, "What happens now?" "Now," Cal said quietly. "We make our report, and whatever actions the captain takes, we will have fulfilled our duty to the best of our ability. And if she sends another team," Cal's gaze remained fixed on the approaching ship, "then they will learn what we learned. Some bonds cannot be broken. Some loyalties transcend regulations, and some creatures should never be underestimated." The shuttle docked with a gentle shudder, and they prepared to disembark. As Jero gathered their remaining equipment, Cal took one last look through the viewport at the distant shape of Homestead 7. For just a moment, he thought he saw a flicker of movement near one of the larger hull breaches, a silhouette outlined against the stars, watching them depart. Then it was gone, and there was only the void. Captain Santos stood rigid in her office, reviewing the fragmentary visual records recovered from the boarding party's helmet cameras. The footage was sporadic, corrupted in places, but it confirmed enough of Cal's report to be deeply troubling. "Play the final segment again," she ordered. The holographic display rewound to the last clear recording from Officer Nev's camera, a blur of motion, a glimpse of metal-reinforced jaw, and then darkness. The audio continued for several seconds afterward, sounds no natural animal should make, halfway between mechanical grinding and organic fury. Santos paused the playback. "And the ship's current status?" Lieutenant Cal, standing at attention before her desk, answered with careful neutrality. "Homestead 7 has drifted beyond scanner range. Captain, last readings showed critical failures in all major systems. The vessel is effectively dead." "And the specimen?" "As I reported, its status is unknown. Given the condition of the ship, survival seems unlikely." Santos studied him, noting the stillness of his inner eyelid. The Vexarian tell was absent. Either he had gained remarkable control over his involuntary reactions, or he genuinely believed what he was saying. She chose not to pursue it further. Your official report will state that the mission was a partial failure due to unexpected specimen modifications and catastrophic ship conditions. You will emphasize the unprecedented nature of the biological-mechanical fusion observed in the target organism, and recommend full quarantine protocols for any similar encounters in the future. And the crew members we lost? Kal asked quietly. They died in service to the Authority, enforcing necessary regulations. Santos replied, Their sacrifice will be noted with appropriate honors. Kal said nothing, but Santos could sense his unspoken judgment. After a moment, she sighed and stood, crossing to the viewport where stars streaked past as Recovery Dawn prepared to return to Authority space. You think me heartless, Lieutenant, a bureaucrat who values rules over lives. It is not my place to judge. Captain. Jill, but you do, she said, still facing the viewport. As I once did, before I learned the necessity of these regulations. She turned to face him. Did you know I was born on Earth, one of the last generations before the final evacuation? I saw what happened when species were transported without proper controls. Entire ecosystems collapsed. Diseases mutated and jumped between previously incompatible hosts. Genetic contamination led to monstrosities that ravaged what remained of our homeworld. Kal remained silent, his posture perfectly correct. The Torres family broke the law, Santos continued. They modified an already restricted species, creating something beyond their control. That creature killed our people. Lieutenant, it destroyed a vessel. The regulations exist for a reason. With respect, Captain, Kal finally said. The creature was defending its family. The modifications were made out of love and a desire to preserve a connection to Earth. The Torres family wanted to keep their companion in a system that would have taken it from them. Sentiment is not an excuse for endangering others. No, Kal agreed, but perhaps it explains why they took the risk, and why the outcome was so extreme. Santos studied her lieutenant for a long moment. You sympathize with them. I understand loyalty, Captain, both to institutions and to those we consider family. Sometimes those loyalties conflict. Santos returned to her desk, activating a terminal. You're dismissed, Lieutenant. Complete your formal report within 24 hours. Recovery Dawn will return to Authority space once all post-mission protocols are complete. Kal saluted and turned to leave. Lieutenant, Santos called as he reached the door. The official record will show that you conducted this mission according to regulations and made appropriate decisions under extreme circumstances. There will be no negative citations in your file. Kal paused. Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me yet, she said, her voice hardening, because the record will also show that I am recommending the immediate implementation of Protocol 17B for the Homestead 7 incident. Kal turned back, his inner eyelid flickering rapidly now. Captain, that protocol authorizes the neutralization of all biological material connected to the incident. Santos finished for him. Yes, I'm well aware. A hunter-killer drone will be dispatched to locate and eliminate the specimen. Should it somehow have survived, the Homestead 7 will be destroyed. No traces will remain. Captain, I must protest. This creature is a dangerous aberration that cannot be allowed to roam free. Santos interrupted. Your report made that abundantly clear. Lieutenant, or do you wish to revise your statement about the threat it posed? Kal's posture stiffened. No, Captain, the creature was indeed dangerous, but it was also Remarkable. A scientific discovery worth studying, not destroying. That decision is no longer in our hands, Santos said, turning back to her terminal. The authority protocols are clear. Dismissed? Lieutenant. Cal departed without another word, leaving Santos alone with the fragmented recordings still playing silently on her holodisplay. She watched the shadows move across the damaged corridors of Homestead 7, caught glimpses of metal-fused bone, heard the echoes of something that had once been a simple earth animal but had become something far more. She thought of Rebecca Torres's final recorded words, "Never separate family members." A simple sentiment that had led to an extraordinary outcome. With a gesture, Santos closed the recordings and opened a secure channel to Authority Command. Her duty was clear, regardless of her private thoughts on the matter. Protocol 17B would be implemented, the specimen would be eliminated, order would be maintained. As she waited for the channel to connect, she couldn't quite shake the feeling that something essential had been overlooked. Something about loyalty and bonds that transcended regulation. Something about the ingenuity born of love and desperation. But such thoughts were luxuries a captain could not afford. She had her orders, as did they all. 3 weeks later, Lieutenant Cal stood in the observation lounge of Outpost 47, watching supply vessels come and go against the backdrop of the nebula that dominated this sector. His reassignment had come quickly after Recovery Dawn's return, a lateral move that was neither promotion nor demotion, but definitely a distancing from Captain Santos and the Homestead 7 incident. He did not regret his actions, though sometimes he wondered if he could have saved more of his team had he understood sooner what they were truly facing. The memorial service had been brief, regulated, like all things under authority control. The families had been notified with appropriate compensation packages. Life had continued. And yet, Cal found himself scanning incoming vessel reports each cycle, looking for unusual incidents, unexplained damage, mysterious disappearances. The hunter-killer drone dispatched to eliminate Echo had never reported back. Its last transmission had shown it approaching a debris field that might once have been Homestead 7, and then nothing. Lieutenant Cal. He turned to find Medic Jero standing behind him, her compact frame now clad in the gray uniform of a civilian contractor rather than Authority Regulation Blue. Dr. Jero, he acknowledged, using her full title now that she had resigned her authority commission. This is unexpected. I was passing through, she explained. On my way to the outer colonies. I've accepted a position with a humanitarian medical outpost. A worthy calling, Cal said sincerely. The colonies need good doctors. Jerome moved to stand beside him at the viewport. And you? How goes life as a logistics coordinator? Predictable. Orderly. He paused. Safe. She nodded, understanding what remained unsaid. Have you heard anything about the incident? Officially, the matter is closed. Protocol 17B was enacted, but reported inconclusive results. The file has been sealed. And unofficially, Cal's inner eyelid flickered once. There have been reports, nothing confirmed. Damaged vessels found adrift. Missing crew. Salvage operations interrupted by unexplained phenomena. You think it's him? Jero said. Echo. I think, Cal replied carefully, that some things are more resilient than authority protocols anticipate, and some bonds cannot be broken by regulation. Jero studied him for a moment. You're tracking the reports, aren't you? Mapping them. As a matter of personal interest only. She smiled slightly. Of course. After a pause, she added, they're moving outward, away from authority space, toward the unregulated zones. Cal nodded. I had noticed the pattern. Do you think it's looking for something? Or someone? Perhaps, Call said. The Torres family had connections in the outer colonies. Rebecca had siblings. If I recall the files correctly. Family, Jero murmured. Indeed. They stood in companionable silence, watching the ships moving through the void. Finally, Jero spoke again. I dreamed about it. You know, after we returned. Not nightmares, exactly. Just visions. That sound it made as we were leaving. That call. I remember, Call said quietly. In my dreams, I understand what it was saying. She hesitated. It was a promise. What kind of promise? Jero turned to look at him directly. That it would find the others, the ones taken from it, that no distance could separate them forever. Call considered this. A comforting thought, in its way. Yes, Jero agreed. Comforting. She glanced at her chronometer. I should go. My transport leaves soon. As she turned to leave, Kaal spoke again. Dr. Jero, if you encounter anything unusual in the colonies, I would appreciate being informed. She nodded. Of course. Lieutenant, as a matter of personal interest only. Safe travels, Doctor. And to you, Lieutenant. Though I suspect your path may be more interesting than regulation allows. After she had gone, Kaal returned his attention to the viewport, watching the ships come and go like mechanical fireflies against the vastness of space. Somewhere out there, beyond authority reach, something remarkable was moving with purpose, a creature born of human ingenuity and desperate love, seeking reunion with what it considered family. Kaal found himself hoping it would succeed. His communication device chimed, signaling the arrival of a new report in his personal queue. Another damaged vessel had been found adrift. This one, a small Authority patrol cruiser that had been investigating an unauthorized settlement in the Cygnus sector. The crew was missing, presumed lost. The damage was extensive, focusing primarily on the brig section where, according to the ship's logs, 2 civilians had been detained for transporting unauthorized Earth fauna. Kaal closed the report. He would add it to his private map later. Another point in a pattern moving steadily outward, toward freedom. Behind him, the outpost's public announcement system crackled to life. Attention all personnel. Be advised that salvage vessel Recovery Dawn has docked at Bay 12. Authority inspection teams will be conducting routine operations for the next 48 hours. Please cooperate fully with all authorized personnel. Kaal stiffened slightly, then deliberately relaxed. Captain Santos had no reason to seek him out. Their business was concluded. The incident was closed. Still, he found himself listening for a sound he had heard only once, a resonant call that was neither animal nor machine, but something new and purposeful. A promise, as Jero had said. Or perhaps a warning. Kaal turned from the viewport and headed toward his quarters. He had reports to review, patterns to map, and a growing suspicion that the Authority had underestimated what Rebecca and Michael Torres had created out on the edge of known space. Not just a modified pet, but a new kind of loyalty, a bond that could not be regulated away, a family that refused to remain separated. And somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars, something that had once been a Pitbull named Echo continued its relentless journey, following the scattered fragments of its purpose across the void. The recovery team still hadn't found all the pieces, but Echo would, in time.